Does it feel like every part of your life is divided? Every scenario, every environment, your church, your school, your work, your friends, left, right, conservative, liberal, religious, secular. It seems you always have to take a side. This is a conversation between a progressive Christian and a conservative atheist who happen to be great friends. Welcome to Living on Common Ground.
Do you think if we met today, we would still be friends?
I don't know, but we're friends now.
A mob is no less a mob because they're with you.
Man, so what? We won a few games. And y'all fools think that's something? Man, that ain't nothing, y'all. And you know what else? We ain't nothing either. Yeah, we came together in camp. Cool. But then we're right back here and the world tells us that they don't want us to be together. We fall apart like we ain't a damn bit of nothing, man.
How are you?
How we sound?
We're great.
All right.
Yeah, the sound engineer is doing a fabulous job.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, I got a text message from you almost 2 weeks ago now. It was a Wednesday. I remember it distinctly because I had just gotten back to
I was on a plane, I think.
Were you?
Yeah, I think I was on a plane.
No, I had just gotten back to my truck. I was at a place called Bandy Creek. And I got back to my truck and I had cell phone reception and it lit up, bling, and I looked and I was like, oh, it's my friend Lucas. And I read it.
You were on the trail, right?
Mm-hmm. It was day 3. Yeah, and I really overdid it, and so I set out to. I wasn't going to do the Appalachian Trail this time because I didn't want to put anybody out because I knew that where I was going to start and where I was going to have to finish to cover areas that I haven't done yet on the Appalachian Trail. It would be a lot to ask someone to drive me because
to pick you up or what?
Drop me off and pick me up because where I would have needed to be dropped off and picked up, I'm asking somebody to drive at least 5 to 6 hours in one direction.
Okay.
And unless you're going that way and you want to drop me off, it just felt like a lot.
Okay.
So what I decided to do was do the Big South Fork instead. And I put together a whole itinerary. And I wanted to go slow. And I wanted to just spend some time reflecting and doing some sightseeing. I think in the text message I sent you, it was kind of like it was going to be like a returning home type of thing. And anyway, I ended up covering somewhere between 40 to 45 miles in 3 days, which was way quicker than the pace I wanted to do.
Okay.
So I was averaging about 15 miles a day.
Yeah.
And so all that to say, I got back to the truck and I saw your text message and I'm not going to go into the whole trail thing, at least not on this because that's not why they're listening.
Yeah, it is.
No. But I would love to tell, like maybe you and Krista, and we can talk about it with Denise and hang out at some point. But it was,
I want to hear about all of it.
It ended up not being anything like I had planned.
Sure.
So, but you had said that you were working on some topics for episodes.
Yep.
And
which I left at home.
Great. Well, you said that it had to do with, in fact, I can pull up the text.
Yeah, that
right
one
here.
particular one. But I know that I was on the plane because I was, that was something I was doing while I was flying is just working on different topics that we could.
Yeah, you said
yell at each other about.
I don't think we'd yell about it because, I told you that someone said that they've been listening and they felt like it was just two people trying to get along.
As I was trying to fix that the last couple of weeks.
Excellent. So you said this. You said, "Here's one. I've been reading the Bible again, specifically the Gospels. How about we talk about the crazy non sequiturs that Jesus says? I keep finding them where he's saying something and then just throws in a non sequitur at the end, that doesn't actually make any sense. And I said, that sounds good. However, one of the questions I had right off the bat is, why are you reading the Gospels? Like, what prompted you to, I mean, like if I had said, hey, I've been reading the Gospels, they'd be like, well, yeah, of course you have been. But when you say like, you've been reading the Gospels, I'm just being honest with you. I was like, why?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you reading them? And so, so that's my question is, what prompted you to sit down and start reading the Gospels?
Why? Well, is your question specifically about why the Gospels, or is your question about why the Bible in general?
Yeah. Yes. Like what prompted you to sit down and say, you know what? I think I'm going to pull out the Bible.
Okay. So, the Bible, reading the Bible again, that's been an ongoing thing for probably the last, off and on for the last year or so. Okay. Here's a little window into Lucas. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
I wake up much earlier than my household, and generally. And lately, actually, in the last like several months, it's been much earlier. It's been like at 4:30. I've been getting up.
Wow.
Not on purpose. I just can't sleep past 4:30 for whatever reason. But usually it's like 5. That's pretty typical, between 5 and 5:30.
You're getting up at the same time the birds start their choir.
Yeah. And I listen to them, and I like all that. That's all fine. It really is just temperament. I'm just an early morning person. I also am like, can't stay awake past like 8 kind of person. If you start a movie or something at 7 o'clock, I'm asleep before the opening credits, My kids get up, or at this point, Ellis gets up around 6. I get him up at 6. So I usually have like an hour to an hour and a half by myself in the morning. And every day I tell myself, I'm going to get up. I'm going to do like meditation, devotional, journaling, affirmations, right? So then I get up and I scroll for an hour and a half. That's what I do every morning. But I will go through time periods where I do get momentum.
Mm-hmm.
I have to force myself. I have my tricks, right? Do the smallest amount that I can do without any discipline, and then grow it from there, right? But I will get momentum sometimes. And so I'll try to read something like, I've got Jordan Peterson's 12 More Rules that I'm reading through for the second or third time. It's a good one because it's 12 different meditations. That's basically what the book is, just like his first one. Or like the Daily Stoic, Ryan Hamilton one, right? Do that. Sometimes I was reading meditations. Sometimes I'll have another
Holiday.
Who did I say?
Hamilton.
Ryan Hamilton. Ryan Hamilton's a comedian. Anyway, yeah, Ryan
Sometimes,
Holiday.
Anyway, go ahead.
Anyway, point is, I'll have like some book. I'll try to be reading a little bit, whatever. So probably about a year ago, I introduced reading. I think it was Proverbs. I was like, that'd be a good book to introduce as let's just see how this feels.
Yeah.
And it's, because it's bite-sized. And, for anybody who's been listening to this podcast or has known me now for the last couple of years at our church knows that, I grew up memorizing the Bible. There's not really any. Well, every once in a while I come across some story or something that I'm not familiar with at all. And it's surprising to me. Some Old Testament story or something. And then obviously there's stuff that you come across and it hits you in a different way and you go, oh, I never thought about it like that and whatever, But in general, very, very familiar. With the Bible, it's it was the centerpiece of my childhood, in terms of literature. And I don't mean to call it literature like dismissive. I just mean like that was the thing, right? Anyway. So it's not like I haven't read Proverbs before, but I was like, because I know Proverbs. I love Ecclesiastes. It's my favorite book of the Bible. And so I was like, I'll read Proverbs, read Ecclesiastes. It's just bite-sized. It's easy. And then I was like, it's been a long time since I've read like the Israelites story. I just kind of started reading some of that, right? And then, so the Gospels thing, though, was that was really because of Lent. So I was out of town for Lent, and I was a little bummed that I was I was out of town for Ash Wednesday. And I was a little bummed because it's of the religious calendar. It's my favorite holiday is Ash Wednesday. And, but I remembered that our old church was they had an Ash Wednesday service. So I went to that. And then Krista had texted me that she and the boys had come here, and we texted pictures back and forth with our crosses on our foreheads. And both of us decided to not drink for Lent. And so I was just kind of, it was in my mind, this particular season of the Christian calendar. And so I already had like this kind of routine of reading some of the Bible along with other stuff, right? And so I was like, well, let's read one of the Gospels. Like it felt timely because of where we were in Lent. And picked Luke. I don't know why. Just picked Luke. And so then started reading through the Gospels. And so it was really, it's very interesting to, well, the thing that I was sending you, I would read some of these passages and I'm familiar with all of them. And like, I'm familiar with the, all the parables, all the, trying to trick Jesus and then his cool responses. And, I've got in my mind, I've got the story. But it's been a long time since I've specifically read it myself. So then I would read things. There were a couple things that stood out to me. One was, how often he clearly was hanging out with religious leaders all the time, all the time. And, I have this picture, growing up, I had this picture of him as rejecting the religious leaders for the common folk. That was the idea. But over and over and over again, the religious leaders are there hanging out with him. Clearly, he had religious leaders, Pharisees, Sadducees, all these types of people as disciples, even. They would have been considered, not one of the 12, obviously, but the people that they would have been called disciples. Yeah. They were like there hanging out, talking, Anyway, so that was very interesting. And the fact that like at the kind of the lead up to the Passion time period in Luke, he's preaching in the temple every day. He preaches at the temple, then he goes out to the Mount of Olives, back and forth. That's what it says. He goes out to the Mount of Olives to rest. And then he comes back and he preaches at the temple every day. Well, like, clearly he's one of them, kind of, in that way. You know what I mean? Anyway, I thought that was interesting. But then, like, what I texted you was that there would be and I wish I should have brought it with me. There'd be these, like, kind of a screed that he would go on in response to a question. And then and it would be about, I don't know. I'll get on our next recording, I'll get some of the specific examples. But it would be something like, the Sadducees are trying to trick him, or the Pharisees are trying to trick him about, should you work on the Sabbath or whatever. And he gives this parable. blah, 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 blah. And it's clear the parable is meant to say, like, you're missing the point of the Sabbath and blah, 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 blah. Great. And it's like this real cool, and he's got a turn of phrase and, everyone's amazed. And then at the end, he goes, and also if you divorce your wife, you're living in adultery and you'll go to hell. And I'm not saying that's the specific, but it's like that. It's like, here's my response to you. And then also here's this other thing that I'm going to tag on there that doesn't, to my ear,
doesn't seem to fit.
Doesn't seem to have anything to do with what he's talking about.
Yeah.
So I think that's, I was very struck by that. It was very interesting.
It is interesting. Part of me, like, as you're talking and sharing about that, I'm thinking to myself, one of the things I thought I was like, was that an editorial? Obviously, I would say, I would be interested in knowing what the editor's purpose for that would be.
Sure.
Right.
Whoever's recording it. And
whoever wrote this down, especially you're talking about Luke. What would Luke's point have been? And because in his mind, or at least for his community, there's a reason to connect the two things. Yeah.
But the reason I bring it up is because it's an interesting experience I have a really clear picture in my mind, I think, of what was intended to be imparted to me as I was growing up of Jesus's life. Not just the purpose, but what actually happened, right? Like I said, the reason I made such a big deal about, like, I memorized these stories over and over and over again is that I've heard all of these screeds. That, again, that sounds dismissive, but I mean, like, I've heard the red letters. I've been in countless, years and years and years of Sunday school, heard them preached, right? So I've heard all of these. And so it's interesting to read these things that I've heard my whole life, and then be like, wait a sec, when I was 16, how did I not notice this? It would just be, I don't want to say it's glossed over, as if, I'm sure this happens, but as if my religious leaders purposefully ignored things. Although I know that happens. That's my point is not that they didn't. My point is that I don't want to just dismiss it as if, well, they just ignored it and gave me what they wanted purposefully. I think what's interesting is that we see the story that we kind of already know exists there, and so reading it, kind of, it's not fresh eyes. I wouldn't call it fresh eyes because they're 45-year-old eyes and I still have all of my background. They're not fresh, but having a break in between the last time I was really reading all the time, which would have been in my early 20s, and then now, it brings to light things that I just didn't realize were there. I think that's interesting.
So I think that I'm not even sure that when you talk about religious leaders like ignoring or they may actually be experiencing the exact same thing you're describing, is that you just don't see it because there's no importance to it with your belief set or your pre-understanding of what the story is about. You don't even see it, and so it's a very unintentional, right? Because we're not looking for it.
Yeah.
Like I was just thinking about how since I started studying Stoicism, how much different my reading has become, especially with regards to Paul and Luke in particular, and John in particular. And so I don't think that, like, I don't think the reason I've never noticed that before, or the reason nobody's ever pointed it out before, was because there was an intent to not, but maybe there was a complete unawareness of even.
Sure.
Right. So, but I do think it's really interesting. I think it's an interesting practice that you could get into. I think it'd be really probably worthwhile is to read and say what seems to be, where is a really awkward segue that the author is doing.
That's what I mean. There's these really awkward segues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, why? What happened there? And I was just, so I pulled up my Bible, and look at what a good Christian pastor I am. I happen to have one right within arm's length.
And you put on your glasses to let everyone know you're serious about reading.
But no, it's so that I can actually read. I hate these glasses, by the way. I got them inexpensive online because my glasses that I got from my doctor broke, and I didn't want to spend a lot. So I have now the bifocals with the line, which is fantastic. All right, so here's one. It's in Luke chapter 9. The story is about Jesus healing a
demon-possessed man.
Yeah, boy. As the boy came forward, the demon knocked him to the ground and threw him into a violent convulsion. But Jesus rebuked the evil. And whenever I see stuff like this, I always want to know the unclean spirit. I could get into a whole, I could talk an entire episode on translations, and how you really got to be careful, because you have to understand that even in your translations, you're reading someone's theology.
Sure, of course.
So the unclean spirit and healed the boy. Then he gave him back to his father. Awe gripped the people as they saw this majestic display of God's power. While everyone was marveling at everything he was doing, Jesus says to his disciples, "Listen to me and remember what I say. The Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of his enemies."
Perfect.
Right?
Perfect.
It's like, wait, what?
Perfect. That's exactly that is the exact example.
Yeah. And so, but they didn't know what he meant. Well, of course, because all of a sudden it's like, what the hell are you talking about?
Right.
We're all celebrating here about how awesome God is and what this great display of God's power we just saw.
Right.
And all of a sudden you're like, and by the way,
the Son of Man will be
delivered.
betrayed into his...
Yeah.
Right.
It's going to be betrayed into the hands of his enemies.
Right.
Right. And then, and it says, but they didn't know what he meant. Its significance was hidden from them, so they couldn't understand it. And they were afraid to ask him about it. They were probably like, is dude losing his mind?
Sure. There's that.
Right. But yeah, so like, what is Luke?
And also Luke is saying in that another thing that is interesting, the meaning was hidden from them.
Yeah.
Luke says the meaning is hidden from them, clearly implying that God is not allowing them to understand. And actually, there's another section that I read, and I thought, why did I never notice this before? Where Jesus says explicitly that God will make people not understand what I'm saying on purpose.
Okay. I'll give you that there are times like that. I do think that we run the risk of reading that into here.
That's true.
Because he does not specifically say that God kept them from understanding.
That's
true.
That
the understanding was hidden from them.
That's
and
true.
And that could just be a way of saying that they were unable to identify the understanding.
That's true. That's true.
And so the only reason I'm sensitive to that,
it sounds like God hardened Pharaoh's heart. It sounds like it.
Yes, and I have no problem with that. The issue that I have with whenever saying that, and this is what's happening here, is that too often I have sat across a table from a person who will quote a passage of scripture to me and then begin to theologically pontificate on that.
Sure.
In a way that it's obvious that this is what the theology is on that.
Sure. I get that.
Okay. So, but to the point, it is a really awkward segue. Because then from there he goes into this idea, and that's like all he says about it.
Yeah.
Because then it's like it shifts again to where the disciples begin to argue about who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom.
Right.
And so, like, I don't know if I would want to go back and look at where does the story show up in Mark? Is this one of those that Luke seems to have been taking from Mark?
Mm-hmm.
Is it part of a larger pericope, where
that's a word you're going to have to explain.
Let's see. How would I explain that word? A larger segment of text that is doing something different.
Okay.
Right. So, and I think I'm using that word right now. I'm going to have to look it up myself because for some reason that popped right into my head. And,
well, one of the things that I was, no, go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
One of the reasons that I, liked this also, and this might have been why I picked Luke, is because it has my favorite parable, my current favorite parable of the Samaritan, which I think has been completely misunderstood, at least from my childhood, and is misunderstood over and over again, in my opinion. But I have already pontificated on that too much. But it has that parable. What is oh, you don't have a red letter Bible. How am I supposed to know what parts of the Bible I'm supposed to read? You don't have a red letter one. Goodness.
I probably do. On that bookshelf over there. No, you're reading my one of my more conservative, yet still not red letter Bible. And I'm sure that there's some people that would tell you that that's not a real Bible, that that's not the right translation. Because apparently, I did find this out. I always used to think that the only quote unquote real translation was the King James version, because that was one that a lot of people in this area, especially in the more rural areas, are like, no, it's like that's the original, the King James, right? But apparently, there's now a newer version that some of the more traditional communities are like, no, that's the real one. And I don't know which one it is. They won't tell me. But
you're not cool enough.
I don't know. But by the way, I did look up the word and I did use it correctly. So yay for me.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I always like to know that if I'm going to use a word that I'm using it right. Unlike my Aunt Gail, who used to just make up words and then say it with such confidence that you began to question whether or not you were right.
I like her vibe.
Yeah. And if you just say it a lot and you say it with confidence, then everyone else around you just shifts. All right. So what are you trying to find?
I'm trying to find another one. There was another one where at the end of talking about something, he then adds on an admonition about adultery. I'm nearly positive that's what it was, and it doesn't seem to have anything to do with.
Well, okay. So when I mentioned the pericope, pericope, however you want to, I'm not sure exactly the pronunciation because I learned the word by reading it.
Yeah.
That just means, by the way, a segment of text from a book.
Okay.
It's very possible that you have these large segments within the Gospels where it's like Jesus teaching.
Okay.
Right? He's just teaching things.
Yeah.
Right? Like this, like for example, Sermon on the Mount.
Right.
It's just they're just trying to. So the author's just trying to unload as much of examples of Jesus teaching as possible.
Right.
And so in order to do that, you have these very awkward. You have these very awkward segues. And it could be, I don't know, but it could be that that's the case. It's like, well, gosh, we've got to figure out how to get this next one in.
Right.
But it's also very possible if we were willing to sit and I would want to do it in a group and say, what are some possible reasons for this particular, like why does this one follow this one? Does this one follow this one? Does this one follow this one? Because I would like to think that there might be some logical progression, at least from the author, on why he would have that statement follow that statement.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that for sure. Because I know, one of the things I was taught in school, in seminary, was the most important part of a sermon are actually your segues.
Why?
Because if you shift too quickly,
if you mess up your segue,
if you shift too quickly, everyone you jolt everyone so much, that they become disengaged from what you're doing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So is it possible that okay? So then, is it possible that the reason the segues in here are so violent, such a violent shift, that is to actually draw your attention?
Yeah, maybe
back in.
Yeah, I gotta find the.
You didn't sound convinced by that. You're like, yeah, whatever.
No, I can imagine that. No, it's like a comedian who is who's doing a joke and then shifts right to something else, and then points and then hangs a lantern on it. Sometimes that's the strategy.
Do you know that I learned public speaking? One of the people I learned public speaking from was an actual comedian, and at one point he had been a writer for SNL.
Oh yeah.
I had an opportunity to meet with him, to hang out with him, have a few drinks with him. He and I were both invited to speak at a conference together, and he was talking about public speaking, and I was talking about design thinking. And so the two of us it was in South Georgia and in Macon, and of all places. And yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, you used to write for SNL? And he was like, yeah. And he now lives out in, I think he's in Colorado now. For a while he was in LA, but he's a comedian and he entered into ministry. But you want to talk about someone that knows how to get your attention and keep your attention.
Oh yeah.
Stand-up comedians.
Yeah. Stand-up comedians are some of the best rhetoricians.
Yeah.
Rhetoricians.
Yeah.
I can't say that word.
Yeah. Yeah. He and he really helped me with segue. Because he liked to use Jay Leno as an example of some of the best segue you've ever seen.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah. I remember Krista talking about that when she went to see a stand-up one time, years and years ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, and how she was really impressed with the crowd work in particular, and how this comedian worked back into their set and then to the crowd and then back to the set, and how it felt to her. I mean, there's a ton of improv, but it felt to her like he would. I think it was a he. I don't know. Was like surfing on the crowd, and there's something instinctive, and it's clearly true. This is actually something I'm very interested in. In Roman Republic, during the Roman Republic, really during the Republic, it phases out. Still, it comes back in later as a kind of a novelty. But once you have the Imperium, that because the Senate is so much less important, the discipline of rhetoric becomes less important. But during the Republic, so for 250 years, 300 years or so, the being educated in rhetoric was a top level educational discipline. That was something you would send your kids to, mostly Greek slaves, right?
Yeah, I was just reading about Seneca.
Yeah,
and they were talking about his training and all that.
And so I was always when I learned about that initially in college, I always kind of had this. I wouldn't say it out loud, but I kind of had this feeling of like, oh, isn't that quaint? Because rhetoric is about how you deliver the message. It's not about content, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Some of it, yeah.
But and that's how I felt. I was like, well, this is ridiculous. You're spending they must have been, I kind of had in my mind like, well, that's because they were more simple people than us, right? We've developed, we've progressed past them.
Yeah, we have video now.
Because they didn't understand. They were more simple-minded. And so they focused on these things that are, it's not important how you deliver the message. The importance is the content, the message. That's what's important, right?
Oh, now who's being simple? Yeah, right.
Well, okay. So about 5 to 10 years ago, I was reconsidering this. I'm listening to my podcasts and, whatever, and reading more Roman history and stuff. And I was having some conversation. I think I was talking to Krista about this, but we were commenting on how there's really no content, no information I know I'm going to get some hackles up about this. There is no information out there that you have to go to college for to get. Really. Everyone knows now, if you want to fix something, go to YouTube. If you want to learn the history of something, you can find it on YouTube. You can Google it. You can find it. Now, I'm not saying that all the information is correct that you're going to get, but it's all there. Virtually everything. I mean, Google how a star dies. Google how nuclear fission works, right? And all the information is there almost for free, right? That's how virtually all content, like all the information is now. And so when all the content is free, all of a sudden, the thing that matters is if you can get somebody to believe you that your thing is the real thing, is the true thing, and that guy over there who's saying that you're wrong isn't, that he's wrong. Well, that's rhetoric. So now we're in a position, and maybe this has always been the case, but it occurred to me, oh my gosh, rhetoric is the most important skill then.
Well, okay, I'm thinking medium is a message. I think that aligns with that, right?
Yep.
Is what are you doing? So the other thing too that I'm thinking about is the debate between Kennedy and Nixon.
Yeah.
Right? Where the people that watched it on TV were sure that Kennedy won.
Yeah.
People that listened to it on the radio were sure that Nixon won.
Yeah.
And I think that to me, because when you talk about rhetoric and I think about do you ever watch the show Rome?
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Remember when one of the centurions, they want him to run for an elected position?
Vaguely.
Okay.
Yeah.
We loved that show. Anyway, they're teaching him the art of rhetoric, and it's about how do you move your arms?
Yes.
And what position and all that. And it's because there's so much visual,
of course,
that determines what's true for us. Which
is
of
course.
Right, yeah, absolutely. And the YouTube video thing you're talking about. If my YouTube video is more attractive than your YouTube video, and we're talking about the same thing, and we disagree, people are going to believe my YouTube video because it looks better.
Obviously. We are not frontal lobe creatures. We are animals who have a frontal lobe that I don't even know how to time this, but call it once an hour, activates and tells us a story about something or whatever, I don't know. But you're absolutely right. We can look at that show that you're talking about, and we can go, that's so funny that they're positioning his arms in a particular way or whatever. But that's just cultural. I know instinctively my cultural body positioning put me up because I learned public speaking at a young age and enjoyed it, and then took every opportunity I could to enhance that for myself. My wife as well. Krista, that's an enormous part of her career is public speaking. We both did this in college. I just instinctively know the body language that I should have in front of an audience. And I know that you could give me content and somebody else who doesn't understand how to deliver a message, the same content, you could give them better content, way better content. You could give them an entire speech. This is not me bragging. This is just this. I just know how to do this thing.
Because you're familiar with the medium.
I'm comfortable with the medium. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think you mentioned culture. We have a tendency when we visually identify with, there's positive aspects of what we're seeing, right? So for example, in our culture, an attractive, fit person is a lot more likely to be believed than a sloppy, overweight person. Because we find the one more attractive than we do the other.
And I would say that in particular, that might cross, I know it does cross culture. It might be close to universal just because of evolutionary reasons.
Yeah.
But to your point, here's an example. If I get up to deliver a message in a suit, or I get up to deliver a message in a flowing white robe.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the suit is going to everything conveys something.
Yep.
That's going to convey
Absolutely.
a much different thing than the flowing white robe.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good example of
white robe
within
is gonna be
churches.
jarring.
Within churches even.
Yes.
Right? So like there was a several years ago, I had a meeting with my district superintendent at the time and the bishop at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a brief moment where I was being considered for a larger church.
Mm-hmm.
And I was told that I was too folksy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was highly offended at first until I looked up the word and I was like, no, actually, you're absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm way too folksy. And it's because the expectation there, what they can hear and what they give credence to and what they give authority to
mm-hmm.
is someone who's going to wear a suit
mm-hmm.
every Sunday.
Sure.
Right. And there are some churches, there are some communities where if you're not in a robe,
mm-hmm.
then then we're not as willing to hear you. This community that we have right now, if I were to stand up in a robe on Sunday and it wasn't Easter or even Easter this year, I didn't wear my robe anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When I first got here, there's sort of an expectation I'd wear my robe every
mm-hmm.
Sunday. Now, if I stood up in a robe, people would be like, what's happening?
Something's happening.
Or when I did wear a suit on Easter and a lot of people were like, well, it's Easter.
Mm-hmm.
But if I started wearing a suit every Sunday,
mm-hmm.
it would be people would be it would be jarring.
It conveys something.
Mm-hmm.
Everything, that's the thing that I think is important for people to realize is that everything about your image conveys something. The thing you might be conveying or the thing you might want to convey.
If I took this.
Is I don't give a crap what I convey. That might be what you want to convey, but you're conveying that.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, getting a tattoo conveys something, right? Having piercings. Okay. None of these are inherently have any moral I can't think of the right word. They have no basis in morality.
Mm-hmm.
Fundamentally.
Right. We'll put a moral value on it. But it's not.
Of course we will. And I could see situations where I could come up with a moral judgment that I would agree with
mm-hmm.
about that. For instance, if I'm trying to get under the skin of my grandmother by wearing something
mm-hmm.
with a swear word, let's
mm-hmm.
say, on it, right? I think I could come up with a moral judgment for that. But fundamentally, that is just a sound. That's just a bunch of colors on a shirt.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally nothing. However, it's clear that I'm trying to convey something, right? It's not this thing that we do that I think younger people do, and it's totally normal for younger people to do this as they're growing through a developmental stage where they're trying to come up with their identity. But the thing, I think if we don't get past it, it can become a little pathological as an adult where we go, I'm just being me. I'm not giving any message. I'm not conveying any message. I'm just being me. That is just untrue. That is the thing that you're conveying. What you're conveying is, I am a person who doesn't give a crap about what you think or whatever.
Right.
There's something you're saying. You're saying a thing.
Yeah. Even in the moment when you're saying, I don't care, you're making a statement about
I don't care.
Right. So, okay. Have you ever heard of Charles Cooley?
Sounds a little familiar.
Well, so I've been doing this thing lately where I get these philosophical quotes.
Okay.
And then I get to think about them, or I'm actually kind of processing. Anyway, I loved this one. I am not what I think I am. And I am not what you think I am. I am what I think you think I am.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I was like, that's hard to say, but it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a way of trying to describe the avatar creation
mm-hmm.
that we're doing.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
But
even if I'm trying to portray an indifference.
Yeah.
I'm trying to portray an indifference because I care.
Of course.
Which is hilarious to me.
And everything.
It's hilarious, not because I'm like making fun of you or whatever, but it's hilarious when you stop and actually process the process.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
There's a scene in one of our favorite shows, Dairy Girls.
Mm-hmm. Love that show, by the way. We loved it too.
Okay. Good. I'm glad that I think maybe we talked about it before, but where the main character
which they're all like 35 years old pretending to be high school kids, which is
actually, I think it's the very first episode in one of the first scenes where she's going back to school and she's going to wear a jean jacket instead of her. She's at an all Catholic girls' school, of course, because it's Northern Ireland, and she's not going to wear her blazer. She's going to wear a jean jacket, and then her mom like makes her wear the blazer, and she comes around the corner, and her friend Claire, who had a jean jacket on, also is like, "What are you doing? We were going to be different. We were going to be individuals." And she goes, "Sorry, my mom said I couldn't." And Claire takes off her jean jacket and she goes, "Well, I'm not going to be an individual by myself." And then she puts on her blazer, which is obviously it's perfect for high schoolers, but like that's clearly what we do. Mm-hmm. I've not really, well, I understand the impulse. Like I could describe why somebody has an impulse to not want to show that they're an individual, that they're not part of this, that they're not going to conform. Mm-hmm. I can understand it. It's not something I was going to say it's not something I relate to, and then I can hear my wife go, "Come on." But I like the idea of being able to figure out how to fit in with any culture. Mm. I just like that idea for myself. Mm-hmm. I like the idea of this is where my wife, she's listening to it. She goes, "Come on, you think you're the most individual of all individuals." I like the idea of being like, I'm not part of anything and I can be a part of everything. Right. Sure. That makes me feel like I'm like, that's my ego, that makes me feel like I'm superior somehow,
I get it.
But I like the rhetoric discipline because of that.
So let's roll it back. All right. So we talked about medium as message. We talked about the importance of being able to, like, how visualization, being able to see, really fully impacts what's being said. And so it's not necessarily just the content, but it's the way the content is presented, which is the whole concept of rhetoric. And then we talked about the importance of segue in that communication part. And even if your content is really good, but your segues are really bad, that also is too jarring. Yep. And so the visual can't be too jarring, but it has to be appealing. Segues have to be appealing. They can't be too jarring. And at the end of the day, if you are creating something that is jarring, you're probably, very likely anyway, doing it in order to draw attention to that, because it's something that is done intentionally, knowing that otherwise you're actually detracting from your message. So segues within the scriptures that you're pointing out in the Gospels that seem to be non sequitur, that seem to not fit, and then even, because some of them don't even seem to be segue, right? Like the one that we looked at.
Right.
It's like, he healed, and look how wonderful. And as they're all amazed at how he's healing, he said, yeah, guess what? He's going to be betrayed. Right. And then like, well, who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom? It's like, wait, what? Right. How does that fit? And so maybe it's just an attempt to try to jam as much information in as they possibly can. And there's a larger story, the paracope, the paracope. I think it's paracope, but anyway, this idea of what is the larger content that's happening is the progression of we're moving towards, within the Gospels, we know that we're moving towards when the quote unquote, depending on which gospel you're reading, the Son of Man, is going to be betrayed, is going to be handed over. Is that just, this is a moment of that, and then we're going to go on to that? Just like a little, hey, don't forget, this is what's happening. This is what's happening. This is a greater story. There's a little glimpse of it. Or is there something that was supposed to jar us that we're supposed to stop for a second? Maybe in this one, it's, we're all so excited about like God, and we all think, we're so pleased with God. But at the end of the day, that's not even going to be enough.
Mm-hmm.
Being amazed by the miracle, maybe that's the point. Maybe in that particular one, the point is we think that it would be enough if we could just experience and witness miracles, that then we wouldn't have done the same thing that everyone else did. But at the end of the day, miracles aren't even going to be enough to keep this from happening.
Sure.
Maybe that's the point.
Maybe.
I don't know. I would be interested in knowing if anybody's listening and anybody wants to bother to email me and let me know what you think. So how's that? Does that wrap it?
Yeah.
Did that bring it back together?
Let's do it.
Did I? Did we
I think so.
put a bow on the end of it?
I don't know. Who knows?
Did we disagree on anything?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Who cares? It's our podcast.
I know, but I mean, if we can try to find common ground, but if we never left common ground, then we're good.
Yeah, I know.
too.
I have topics that I will email you that have stuff that we'll disagree on.
Okay. Well, I have a topic that I don't know if we'll disagree on, but I think it would be interesting to talk about, and it'll allow me to talk a little bit more about my trip too, is this idea of memory and how most of our memories are fabrications in order to maintain the narrative that we tell ourselves.
Okay.
All right.
Till next time.
Yeah. Thanks.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to Living on Common Ground. Please follow wherever you listen to your podcasts and share it with your friends. You can also find a link to our social in the description. The more people we have living on common ground, the better the world will be.